Hi, this is Buddy Hackett. I passed away a lot of years ago, but when I'm alive, I used to listen to Edge TV Confidential. Tune in now before you're dead.
Ed Robertson welcoming you back to TV Confidential, a radio talk show about television that is about to take a serious look at the subject of comedy. Not just comedy in television, but comedy in just about every conceivable format and from every conceivable angle as we welcome Mr. David Misch. David began his career in show business by writing for such popular television series as Mork and Mindy, Police Squad, Saturday Night Live, and Late Night with David Letterman. He has also written and or produced shows for just about every major broadcast and cable network, including the award-winning animated series Duckman, starring the voice of Jason Alexander. David Misch is also the author of a new book called Funny the Book, Everything You Want to Know About Comedy, which is an entertaining look at the art of comedy from a historical, psychological, scientific, philosophical, and even theological angle. David's book also explores comedy from the worlds of movies, television, theater, stand-up, jokes, as well as his own personal experience as a writer of comedy for television and other fields over the past 35 years. We will tell you where you can find Funny the Book in just a second. But first, David Misch, welcome to TV Confidential.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. What led you to write this book?
Tremendous financial need. I understand that if you write a book, it sells and then you get lots of money.
Yeah.
So that seemed to me like a great deal. It's turned out differently than I thought. It turns out to be a lot trickier than that. No, I did it because I love comedy. I've always loved it, and I also like taking things apart and seeing how they tick. Even when I was young, I loved behind-the-scenes stories of how movies and TV shows got put together. And so given that I've loved comedy most of my life, that I thought it'd be interesting to see what it is, what it actually consists of, and also to try to defy the old saying that if you examine humor, you break it. You can't enjoy it anymore. I'm hoping my book will put the lie to that.
Well, just speaking from my experience as a reader, David, you don't have anything to worry about, because I will say there's some sections I didn't follow as well as others, but it's like overall I appreciated the various angles, everything from like the oldest recorded joke in the world to the funniest joke in the world, the one that is found to convey the most laughs at the most time. I mean, all that is very, very interesting, and it adds to the value, especially of some of my favorite comedians or favorite shows, such as Police Squad, which you wrote for and which you talk about in Funny the Book, as well as such iconic comedians as Woody Allen and George Carlin.
Absolutely. Well, given that it's 200 pages, possibly comprehensive is the wrong word, but I do try and touch a lot of bases.
Well, you touch a lot of bases, and there is also an interactive element to the book, where even if you're reading it in the book is available in a softcover paperback. So even if you're holding the actual physical book, if you are near your laptop or your iPhone and have access to the web, there's an interactive component to the book, isn't there, David?
Yeah, well, I'm basically a really cutting edge guy, so we incorporated some elements of the internet into it. Basically, throughout the book, when I refer to a specific video or audio thing, there's a link to the website for the book, which is the difficult to remember funnythebook.com.
Yes.
And you can go there and see videos that show what I'm talking about, which I hope makes things a little more vivid and also introduces people to things they may not be familiar with. So, I'm hoping that will be a fun thing. And also, for those listeners who have not purchased their copies yet, and I'm sure there are no more than one or two of those, but if you want to, for free, get this stuff, you can just go to the website, and there's videos and all sorts of fun things to look at. And
that website is funnythebook.com.
That's the one.
That's a good name for a website about a book called Funny the Book.
Yeah, I just thought of doing things like, here are flowers. I don't know why. It just seemed like the thing, but I was dissuaded from that. They pointed out it really had nothing to do with the book. So.
Absolutely. Hey, David, tell me, why is it that some people could tell a joke and some people cannot? I mean,
I have many of my friends who were screenwriters in the earlier years are now teaching screenwriting, and this sort of gets to a similar thing. Because there's some disagreement in the field about this, whether funny can be taught or not. I'm of the opinion, and there are many people who agree with me and others who don't, that it cannot in one sense. That is, if you are funny, you are funny. If you are not funny, you cannot be made funny. However, if you are funny, you can learn to be funnier. You can learn to do your craft in a more professional, inspired way. So in the same way, I think for civilians, you either know how to tell a joke or you don't, and the comedy principles, many of which are mentioned in the book, those either are intuitive or they're not. And you just get people who screw up jokes all the time. And by the way, I may point out that I think I have a fairly good grasp of comedy, and I am terrible at telling jokes. I can't remember them, and then I screw them up. So there's not always a direct connection between being funny and being able to tell a joke.
Well, maybe first of all, I don't feel so bad when you just said that you can't tell a joke. I like to think that maybe I'm not a funny person, but I know how to entertain people, at least within the confines of this program. I mean, I like to think I have a sense of what works and what doesn't work. And when I read a joke, such as, one of the jokes you list in front of the book is one of your favorite jokes. Unfortunately, the punchline is such that we cannot. It contains a word that we cannot say on the air. But when I read it, I fell out of my chair laughing. But if I were to tell the joke, even if I memorized it by heart, I would screw it up.
Yeah, well, it happens. I mean, actually, if I memorize a joke, then I can tell it pretty well.
Yeah.
But for some reason, my brain resists that. And there's a different area of neurology, which I actually do go into in the book, but it's an area I have not talked about, which is memory, because, I can still remember the starting lineup for the 59 Chicago White Sox, but I can't remember the joke I heard last night exactly right.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you the same question, only from a different angle. There's some performers who are very funny off camera, but when the camera rolls, their attempt to portray humor comes across a lot more forced. And so therefore they're not funny on film, even though they are funny when they're at a cocktail party over lunch or whatever. I mean, is that just a difference in the skill set, or are they just trying too hard?
I think it depends on the person. It's a fascinating topic, which is the relationship. Well, actually, it's one of the key elements of my book is the relationship between comedy and drama. And the spoiler alert, I say there essentially isn't, which isn't very helpful, but of course they do have very different reactions. So there's a mystery at the heart of comedy. But getting more to your question, I think almost all actors, both dramatic and comedic, would say that comedy is very hard, and many of them will say comedy is harder than drama. You see a lot of dramatic actors who fail at doing comedy, and a lot of comedic actors who do very well with drama. Look at Don Rickles, one of the most you can love him, and I think he's terrific, but he's very superficial. I mean, he just has one shtick.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't think someone like that would be a great dramatic actor, but when he came in the movies in the 60s, he was spectacular.
Absolutely.
He was wonderful, and there was no hint of the comedic Rickles anywhere. He just did a great job. So there's so many examples. Ed Wynn comes to mind, too. He was able to do dramatic roles. So I think it's a skill set, but I have had some experience there because Police Squad, which you mentioned, and I'm sure 6 of your listeners know, it was a series in the 80s that came out after the movie Airplane,
mm-hmm.
Which was done by the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams, and they tried to sell their next movie to be a cop movie, and they couldn't sell it, so they said, screw it, we'll do it for TV, and that's what Police Squad was. It was essentially Airplane on TV with cops. And the lead, as he had been a supporting player in the movie, was Leslie Nielsen, who had been a romantic leading man in Hollywood for 30 years. And as far as I know, Airplane was his first really straight-out comedy role, aside from some romantic comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And he killed it. And then he did the lead in a series, and he killed that too. He was just spectacular by doing nothing. The whole idea was to not be funny. And you have to not be funny in a funny way, and he did it. I'll give you one other example. A friend of mine's a very prominent director in Hollywood, a TV director, and he did a series, I will not name the name of it, but it was one of the top 2 or 3 sitcoms of the 80s. And the female lead, it had a male comic as the lead, and the female lead was and is a wonderful actress, just great. And she did a wonderful job in this show. She was hilarious. I spoke to him, and he said, there is no less funny person on the planet. She is utterly incapable of getting a joke or telling a joke or even having much of a sense of humor. What she is an actress. And if you tell her this is how you do the line, this is the attitude behind it and the character behind it, she'll nail it. And she did.
We're talking to award-winning television writer, producer David Misch. David is the author of Funny, the book. Everything you want to know about comedy, which you can find in bookstores everywhere, as well as Amazon.com, BarnesNoble.com, DavidMisch.com, FunnyTheBook.com, and wherever books are sold online. For our listeners in Southern California, David will be presenting A Brief History of Timing, a comedy chronicle at the Skirball Cultural Center, 2701 North Sepulveda Boulevard in Los Angeles on Sunday, June 24th, beginning at 2 p.m. Tickets are free, but reservations are recommended. Call 877-722-4849, 877-722-4849. David also has an event coming up, a book signing event coming up at Book Soup in Los Angeles on July 26th. For more information on that, as well as other upcoming events on David's schedule, go to either funnythebook.com or davidmisch.com. Misch is spelled M-I-S-C-H, davidmisch.com, which brings up another subject in your book, David. You say there are certain sounds that are funnier than others. You say that hard consonants are funny, S sounds, sibilants, are funny. So I would imagine you being a scholar in comedy and as well as a professional comedy writer, I guess you would say you're born with, you feel blessed to have been born with the last name of Misch.
That's true. Although it would be funnier if it was Mischk. And actually, it used to be. It was Mischkowski. So if they had just kept the K and lost the Owski, I'd be a hilarious guy. I'll tell you, I don't think it made the book, but they did a study, because they do studies about everything, and they have determined what the funniest word in the English language is. Would you like to take a guess?
Is it something I could say on the air?
It is, although it's close to something you can't. Actually, wait a minute, I think I mischaracterized it. I don't think it's the funniest word. It's the funniest animal. I'm sorry. It's the funniest animal. But the word is pretty funny, too, and the word and the animal is duck.
Ah.
There are a few reasons. Got a fairly hard D at the beginning,
yes,
a real hard K at the end. It's a funny-looking animal. It's a silly-looking animal, and of course, it sounds like an obscenity. So, what more can you ask for in a single syllable?
So, were you thinking of that when you put together the show Duckman?
No, but you know, we comedy writers, when we get into a pinch, we are shameless. We'll pull out anything we can, and we'll throw in the word duck or any other silly-looking animal just to get a laugh, because we need one at that moment.
Before we leave the topic of Police Squad, we're talking about how the idea behind that show was no mugging, less and more. Don't try to telegraph the joke; just say it. The lines themselves are funny. The situation is funny. Don't get in the way of the furniture. And as you point out, Nielsen was brilliant doing that. Another guy who I think was also very good, and he gets overlooked, I think, is Peter Lupus, because who played Norbert on the show. And we think of Peter Lupus from Mission Impossible, but he was really good when he did Police Squad.
He was. I wasn't on the set a lot of the time. We were mostly writing, and it was shot like a movie, so there was no audience and no one set. So there was no need to go down there like on a sitcom many times a week. But I did get on the set occasionally, and I don't seem to remember anyone having any problem. I think there may have been people fired who I was not aware of, but basically all the actors got it. They'd all seen Airplane, so they knew what the Zucker-Abrams-Zucker style was, which is, this is not a joke. This is an actual sentence, and you just say the sentence, and you don't worry about the fact that it's ridiculous. And it was interesting that one of the rumors about why Police Squad was not successful in terms of getting renewed and on the air for many years is that an ABC executive supposedly said the problem with that show is you have to watch it.
Yeah.
And what he meant by that was, like my mother never watched TV. She listened to TV while she was knitting. She would glance up occasionally and get the general drift of what the scene was about, but it wasn't like anything so critical was going on that she had to watch the screen the whole time. With Police Squad, if you didn't look, if you only listened, it sounded like not only a regular cop show, but a not particularly interesting cop show. And in fact, we stole all the plots from an old TV show called M Squad. We literally got a bunch of cassettes of M Squad and watched them and wrote down what the plots were and then used them. But the point was that our humor was, even though it was very broad, it was also subtle in the sense that you had to put together the visual with the orals in order to get the joke.
Which ties in with one of the very premises of Funny the Book, David, which is there's a lot more thought and there's a lot more deliberation behind humor and comedy itself than people may realize. It takes a lot to deliver that belly laugh.
Yeah, I thought Bridesmaids was great. And by the way, I should say at the outset here that I think expert is maybe not the right word, but I know a lot about comedy. But what I don't know is what you'll find funny. Everyone finds things funny for different reasons. So what I like, you may not like. It doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong, although it probably does. But people's senses, in fact, Shakespeare had a great quote, which was a jest's prosperity is always in the tongue of he that makes it, never in the ear of him who hears it. Meaning that it's, oh wait, I got it exactly wrong. It's in the ear of him who hears it. That is, it doesn't matter who's telling the joke, it matters who's hearing the joke. It matters if you process that as being funny. Anyway, Bridesmaids I thought was great, and I read a bit about it, and I know that it took Kristen Wiig and her writing partner, I think as long as 2 years, working with Judd Apatow to get the script the way they wanted it. And you look at it now, to me it seems to flow, it's just effortless, it's just brilliantly funny, one scene after another. That is so not true. They agonized over that script. It changed tremendously over the course of time.
We are talking to award-winning television writer-producer David Misch. David is the author of Funny the Book. Funny the Book, everything you want to know about comedy, including the answer to the eternal question, why are fart jokes funny? You can order Funny the Book is available in bookstores everywhere, as well as Amazon.com, BarnesNoble.com, DavidMisch.com, FunnyTheBook.com, and wherever books are sold online. Why are fart jokes funny, David?
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up because you know that at the end of the book, I decided to sum up all human knowledge and all human questioning and all human interest in the question of comedy with that question, why are fart jokes funny? Because I think it's actually key to the whole idea of comedy as an art form. And I don't want to give everything away.
No.
I mean, we must leave some mystery for those people willing to plunk down their $13. But I think fart jokes are funny because they come from the body and because they're not intentional. They are reminding us that our bodies are separate from our minds. And what that reminds us is we're animals. There's a great quote in the book from Hugh Hefner, who said that, we're animals, we're just sex beasts and things like that, and people would say that's horrible, it's dehumanizing. He said, look, if we're not animals, that leaves vegetables and minerals, so take your choice. And it's totally true, we are animals.
Yeah.
We are reminded of our animal nature, and that's hilarious, because animals are dumb creatures. They just poop, they just eat, they just have sex. And it's funny to think that we are actually like that in so many ways. I mean, we know it, but we don't always like to be reminded of it. We like to think we're a little better than that.
And again, going back to one of the premises behind the book, the reason why certain type of jokes are funny, such as fart jokes, and I mean, you trace this, and there you go through different cultures and different periods in history, and there are versions of basic jokes that go back even as far back as, a prehistoric era. So there's a reason why certain things work no matter what period of time we're in.
Yeah, well, in the book, what has been shown to be the oldest recorded joke in human history is a fart joke, and it's from 1900 B.C. in a civilization called the Sumerians. So if it was good enough for them, damn it.
It's good enough for Funny the Book, which you can find at funnythebook.com. We'll take a quick time out, then we'll continue our conversation with David Misch here on TV Confidential.
Story Salon is Los Angeles' longest-running storytelling venue. We have live shows every Wednesday in Studio City, as well as solo shows, podcasts, CDs, and several books. Los Angeles Daily News calls Story Salon gemstones of narrative, something new, funny, astonishing. Sunset Magazine says tales tall, tragic, and tantalizing. All of this makes Story Salon one of the most eclectic entertainment experiences available. You can learn more about us by going to our Facebook page or by visiting our website at www.storysalon.com.
Ed Robertson, along with our friend Bill Funt of CandidCamera.com, where you can purchase not only some of the compilation DVDs of Candid Camera that were released by Rhino Entertainment, but I understand, Bill, that you also have a new customized service that is now available to the public.
Yeah, we also have a service now in which we will sell complete episodes and clips to anyone who writes in or emails in and wants them. So if you either were in a segment and you can recall it, or you say, oh, I love the one with Don Knotts doing the watch repair. If you want that, get in touch with us and we'll fish it out. And for the right price, we'll send it to you.
And they would contact you through CandidCamera.com?
Yes. That's
www.candidcamera.com?
That is correct.
One more time. www.candidcamera.com.
Yes. We took great care to include the www first and the .com last.
That's www.candidcamera.com. One more item. If you're a fan of James Garner, if you're a fan of the Rockford Files, if you're a fan of TV Westerns in general, you'll definitely want to know about the revised second edition of Maverick, Legend of the West, the definitive guide to the classic TV Western series that made James Garner a star, which is available now at MaverickLegendofTheWest.com. At a time when network television was loaded with cowboy heroes, Maverick not only stood out from the pack, but turned the genre inside out by changing the way we looked at traditional television heroes. Besides putting James Garner on the map, Maverick was also the first show created by Roy Huggins, a man whose influence on television is still very much felt today. Maverick, Legend of the West, is now completely revised with more than 100 pages of new interviews, additional information, behind-the-scenes photographs, and a whole lot more. That's Maverick, Legend of the West, available now at MaverickLegendofTheWest.com.
Well, I guess we're off on another zany adventure.
You dropped the log line there, old pal. We're off on the road to Dendron, buddy. We're going because of my son.
Let's ship off the old blockhead.
We don't know what we'll find in Dendron, buddy, but we're legally obligated.
Hi, this is Pat Harrington. You're listening to TV Confidential.
Ed Robertson, along with our guest David Misch. David began his career in show business writing for such series as Mork and Mindy, Police Squad, Saturday Night Live, Late Night with David Letterman, and the award-winning animated series Duckman, starring the voice of Jason Alexander. David is also the author of a great new book called Funny, the Book. Funny, the Book. Everything you always want to know about comedy, which you can find in bookstores everywhere, as well as Amazon.com, BarnesNoble.com, as well as David's website, DavidMisch.com, M-I-S-C-H, DavidMisch.com, as well as FunnyTheBook.com. For our listeners in Southern California, David will be presenting A Brief History of Timing, a Comedy Chronicle at the Skirball Cultural Center, 2701 North Sepulveda Boulevard in Los Angeles on Sunday, June 24th, beginning at 2 p.m. Tickets are free, but reservations are recommended. Call 877-722-4849, 877-722-4849, 877-722-4849. And if you cannot make the event on June 24th, you will also have a chance to meet David Misch at Book Soup, 8818 Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood on Thursday, July 26th, beginning at 7 p.m. For more information, go to the author events page at booksoup.com, www.booksoup.com. Let's see, David, in Funny the Book, you say that Jews are funny, but women are not funny. What do you mean by that?
Oh, I don't say either of those. Oh, my God. Suddenly the listenership falls off a cliff. No. I do say that some Jews are funny, and some women are not funny, and some men are not funny. But the Jews thing, oh boy, I don't know where to start, but let's start with women first. What I said is that this is something that has been believed by men for, since time immemorial, that women are not funny, and I think that sort of translates to women should not be funny. It doesn't seem attractive for a woman to be funny, and you know why? Because funny comes from smart. In order to be funny, you have to have a degree of smartness, because that's what wit is. That's what playing with words is. It requires thought. And I think women were supposed to just sit there and be pretty.
Yeah.
And if they weren't pretty, they were supposed to stay the hell away. That is finally changing. I've been around for a while now, and I've seen this whole thing with women not being funny come and go, and a woman comes up and is popular, and they say, Roseanne came up, and they see, women can be funny, and then she fades away and women aren't funny anymore. I think for the first time it's actually starting to take hold now. Sarah Silverman, Tina Fey, Kristen Wiig, I mean, I don't think it's going to go away this time. Women are playing on an equal field now. They're accepted, and they're running things in many areas of the business, and they're at the very top in many areas of the business. It's still not equal, not remotely equal. There's still a tremendous amount of prejudice, which I think is straight-out sexism. But for the first time, I think men who are sort of anti-women in comedy have to sort of be careful who they say that to.
Right.
Too many people who aren't women will disagree with them.
Right, and I phrased the question the way I did, David, knowing I was going to get a response like that from you, which is to bring up the bigger point, which is what you mean is there are a lot of funny comedians over the years, but for whatever reason, up until recent time, it seemed there were more male comics than female comics.
Oh, immensely more, and I think it really was straightforward sexism. People talk, I don't know how many of your listeners will remember, but Red Fox was a famous black comedian, very, very dirty. And at the same time he was around, Moms Mabley was around, and she was just as dirty. She's really the spiritual foremother of Whoopi Goldberg. But she was dirty, she was tough, she was aggressive, just essentially a female Red Fox, or he was a male Moms Mabley. But she didn't get anywhere near the fame and fortune that Fox got. But, as I say, things are changing.
David, this calendar year 2012 is the 40th anniversary of George Carlin's famous 7 words you can't say on television routine. And for the most part, you still can't say any of the 7 words on broadcast television. But at the same time, it seems to me that the standards on network television in particular have changed, and the bar has lowered, at least on a lot of network comedies that are coming out of the box today. What are your thoughts on that subject?
Well, the comedy that leaps to mind is Two Broke Girls, which among our comedy writing circles is referred to as the vagina show.
Yes.
It feels as if they can't go through 5 minutes of dialogue without saying vagina. And, I'm all for breaking taboos, but after a point it just becomes a cliche. It isn't actually funny to just say the word vagina over and over again, but God bless him for doing it. Things have changed, things have loosened up without question, but Carlin is still pretty cutting edge, and when he did it then, it was obviously not just a shocking routine, but one that actually went to the Supreme Court where it lost. He did not have the right to say those words. In this case, on radio. It was a radio station that had replayed part of the routine. And I thought that Lenny Bruce who obviously was the spiritual forefather of George Carlin, Lenny Bruce had a great line about it. He said, the problem is if you can't say F, then you can't say F the government.
That's right.
You just can't be drawing those lines. Now, they talk about the vulnerability of children. I suppose there's a point there, and maybe there's a time of night that you should wait until that time to do the language. But, there's this magical thing called the off button, and if you have kids in the house, keep that off button on. To me, censorship is generally speaking bad because there's no definitive way to employ it. You were going to talk about this recent Don Rickles thing, and I think that's a good example. You want to bring that up? Yeah.
It was about a week ago as we are recording this. Rickles was performing at the AFI American Film Institute tribute to Shirley MacLaine, where he made a joke that, according to the Hollywood Reporter, it caused a gasp throughout the room. And the joke was, this is Rickles at the AFI tribute to Shirley MacLaine, "I should not make fun of the blacks," Rickles said. "President Obama is a personal friend of mine. He was just over at the house yesterday, but the mop broke." Now, there are some who are saying, well, it's just Rickles being Rickles. As you pointed out earlier, he basically has one shtick. But there are others who say that it made people cringe because you shouldn't go there. What are your thoughts on that, David?
Well, my first thought, and again, this part is a very personal one, is I don't think the joke's funny. If a joke is funny, even if it's racist, people tend to let their guard down a bit. This was not. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, here's the deal. This is what Don Rickles does. He's been doing it for 50 years. He does it really well. He insults people. Mm-hmm. He insults them with their weight, their height, their hair, and the amount of hair they have, the size of their breasts, the size of their penis. He'll use, and of course, their race. He'll use anything he can, and he's been doing the same thing for years and years. If this had been a better joke, maybe people wouldn't even object it. It was so lame that it really didn't work. But what do you do about that? I mean, you say people shouldn't do it. He's been wildly successful doing it. And any comedian tries out different things. They're not all going to work. He's going to fail sometimes. Was it racist? Yes, I think it was racist. But Rickles does racism, and everyone knows he doesn't mean it.
Right.
But he's been doing it with every race for many, many years, and he insults white people, much more than black people, just because of numerical reasons. So it's really difficult to criticize that, and I actually think it gets into something that's key to the book, which is the mythological character Trickster. Mm-hmm. All comedians come from Trickster, and the idea of Trickster was that he was the upender of order. He was the sower of chaos, the threat to society. Trickster always screws with people and screws with conventions and screws with rules. That's what comedians do. So when they screw with a rule you don't like, that's hilarious. When they screw with a rule you do like, or with someone you do like, you get offended. But you can't draw that kind of line. If you don't like it, then don't listen to that comedian. But that's what they do. That's what we do. Our whole purpose, the self-appointed purpose of comedians, is to sow disorder, is to make people think about things, to play with words, to play with concepts, so that you have to reorder your thinking to get the joke. And in this case, it didn't work. Other times it does.
I want to bring up another trickster, Richard Pryor, while we're on the subject of race and comedy. But before I do that, there's a final point to Carlin and the 7 words I want to make, and it kind of ties in with the Rickles joke in the sense that the genius of Carlin's 7 words routine, just as the genius of just about every routine that Carlin did, was that he wasn't being gratuitous in saying the words. He was explaining what it was about the words that if you put the words in a certain context and you took them out of context, there's humor in them. Whereas with the use of vagina on shows like Two Broke Girls, it just seems gratuitous.
I agree. And you know what, Carlin, talk about playing with language, that was George Carlin. Mm-hmm. Again, people may remember individual routines, but what he was about, and he couldn't have been more upfront about this, is he loved exploring language. Mm-hmm. He loved breaking down words, figuring out why some were offensive, some weren't, but also have nothing to do with obscenity, just words like the word stuff. He had a great routine about the word stuff. Mm-hmm. And he would talk about what he called soft language, where you try and take something offensive and make it sound better. Patagonian toothfish becomes Chilean sea bass. The dump becomes the landfill.
Yeah.
So he was wonderful about dissecting language, and that's what the 7 Dirty Words routine was about.
We're talking to David Misch. David is the author of Funny the Book, which is about everything you ever wanted to know about comedy, from a historical angle, a sociological angle, a psychological angle, every sort of angle you can think of, and you can find Funny the Book in bookstores everywhere, as well as Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, DavidMisch.com, FunnyTheBook.com, and wherever books are sold online. Let's see. We brought up
you want Pryor?
Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor, I mean, he was another guy who pushed boundaries with his use of language and also through social commentary. But you say in Funny the Book that the real genius of Richard Pryor was the way he used his own vulnerability in the act.
Yeah, you know, Eddie Murphy, when he started out as a comic, he said he owed everything to Pryor. And I felt that Murphy had skimmed superficially over who Richard Pryor was. He got the thing about black-white relations. He got the thing about swearing. he didn't get the fact that Richard Pryor was opening himself for us to look at. And there's a great quote in the book from a black comedian named D.L. Hughley, who said, "Most people spend their lives trying to hide what they're afraid of from people. Richard spent his life showing people what he was afraid of." And through all of his routines, this intense vulnerability shines through, and that's what ties us to him. That's what makes him universal. Even when he's speaking entirely from the black perspective, white people still got him, felt for him, and empathized with him, which makes no sense and is just, I think, genius. His most famous routine, and I think the routine in the act of the 20th century for comedy, the best, was when he imitates his own heart trying to kill him in the middle of a heart attack. And this, to me, sums up another one of the book's secret themes, which is summed up at the end, which is that comedy is really about death. Comedy is about laughing in the face of death, proving we're alive by proving our most vital part, which is among them is humor. And Pryor showing the moments of near death filled with comedy, your mind is just blown watching this routine, and the whole act is wonderful. It's you can get it on video. It's Richard Pryor live in concert from 1979. Anyway, that's what I think makes Pryor stand out from other comedians who have sworn and have talked about racism, because he also had a huge amount about male-female relationships, and he always did it while showing his own frailties and insecurities.
Yeah, and again, it's what we said before in regards to the 7 words and the lowering of the bar in certain network television shows, certain network comedy shows these days. It's not just the use of the words; it's the context in which you use the word and the character that you're conveying in saying the words. That's what makes that's what makes it funny.
Absolutely.
Let's see, real quickly. One of my favorite chapters in the book is your chapter on Buster Keaton. We did a program. We did a program a few weeks ago, David, where we discussed Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and it seems to me anyway, and I think there are some schools of thought along these lines. There's a line of demarcation where you either like Chaplin or you like Keaton, but not necessarily both. But you say debates like that are like choosing between John Lennon and Paul McCartney. What do you mean by that?
Well, most people like the Beatles, but the more you get into them, you realize that there were 2 very distinctive strains within them. Lennon was more acerbic and sort of hard-edged in his music and his lyrics, and McCartney was a little more sentimental, although both could go very much against their own stereotypes when they wanted to, and did. But in the same way, if you like the Beatles, then you essentially like them both, and it's only if you dig deeper you might favor one over the other. Same with Chaplin and Keaton. There is a little difference, though, because Chaplin is, in a way that more than Keaton, in a way that McCartney was not more than Lennon. I think Chaplin's more accessible. Chaplin, basically everyone loves. Everyone, not just in our culture of all ages, but in all cultures. He was, at the time, the world's biggest superstar, and the amount of his fame probably isn't matched even today by any performers. Keaton was less well-known. He was still very famous, still very popular, but he requires a whole different empathetic challenge, because Keaton didn't give. Chaplin, you could tell when he was sad. You can tell when he was in terrible circumstances, when he was love-struck or something like that. Keaton gives you almost nothing. The great stone face is what he was called. And he did that because he said early in his career he discovered that people laughed more when he didn't give any expression. But what he did that I think is so much subtler and more interesting and more modern is he draws the viewer in. Mm-hmm. He doesn't ask you for anything. He says, here I am. You want me? You come and get me. You figure out what's going on here. And there's actually a corollary with Steve Martin, who famously, for his stand-up act, decided he was not going to do the standard thing of telling people when the joke ended. Mm-hmm. You had to figure that out for yourself. And by forcing the audience to do a little more work than normal, you pull them in more than normal, with the exception of people who don't want to do the work and stand back and say, that's not funny. So that's why I think Keaton is so spectacular and, as I say, very modern. even if you love Chaplin, there's this Victorian sentimentality about him that is sort of foreign to today's emotional climate. Whereas Keaton, with his complete deadpan, it can never be foreign. You always read in what you want. Which
goes back to one of the basic premises of Funny the Book, which is there is a lot more thought to the subject of humor than meets the eye.
Well, one of the basic themes of the book is respect for comedy. I think everyone loves comedy, but most people sort of dismiss it. I can make my uncle laugh by putting a lampshade on my head, so what's so special about comedy? But doing it professionally requires a huge amount of work. I often say that the worst sitcom on TV, you look at it and say, that's just crap. There are some of the most talented people in the world slaving away all night in an office who are doing it, and it can often be not funny for reasons that have nothing to do with the talent of the people behind them. I think that comedy just requires enormous effort and understanding the amount of work that goes into it and the significance of it will make you as respectful of it as of drama. That Some Like It Hot is the equal of Death of a Salesman.
Final question, David. You've done Funny the Book. You are doing Funny the Talk at the Skirball Center here in Los Angeles on Sunday, June 24th. Can Funny the Movie be far behind?
I assume not. I'll be getting the call, I would assume, any moment.
David, this has been
Funny the Sequel.
Yes, Funny the Sequel. There you go. Well, David, this has been a lot of fun. I hope we will have a sequel to our conversation one of these nights on TV Confidential.
I'd be delighted.
Stay with us, folks.